Okay, good morning. So we're up to Siman Shin Mem. We're in the middle of the Mishnah Berurah, and the Mishnah Berurah is going to do something very interesting. He's basically going to say that we're learning Hilchas Ksiva in Sif Daled, the prohibitions of writing we spoke about yesterday, cutting a birthday cake and writing in the air and all that sort of stuff. And now the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, look, the Shulchan Aruch is quite short about the details of Kosev and Mochik, so I'm going to give you a summary of all the pertinent halachas. So basically what we're going to do today is finish off Sif Daled and go through the summary of all the halachas relating to writing and erasing Kosev and Mochik on Shabbos. So we're up to the word Va'agov. It's about just after Sif Kot and Chof Beis. Can you see 3 lines after that? After Sif Kot and Chof Beis, it says Va'agav Neva'e Pai. You see it? It's about 10 lines from the bottom of the page in our edition. Yeah. You got it there? Va'agav. Neva'e Pai min ha-Gemara v'ha-Poskim Ikrei Dinei Kosev v'Mochik b'divrei b'dover sheyesh b'chiyuv chatas b'dover shehu potav also ki ha-Shulchan Aruch kitze b'zeh. The Shulchan Aruch was quite brief regarding the halachas of Kosev and Mochik, and so I'm going to just give you some pointers. So here we go. Aleph. Ein ha-Kosev chayav ad sheyichtav b'dover ha-Rishon v'omed. The person is only chayav for Kosev if he writes on something which is lasting, or with something which is lasting, or shcher with ink, or shcher, which is hanu pecha, which is like a coal, for sikra tzva edom, which is a red dye, for kumas strafa'il on the sap of a tree, or me'afotzim, v'kankantzim, uchliaferes, all types of inks. For chol kiyetzi b'zeh shel dova hamiskayim. So you only chayav for ksiva on Shabbos if it is dova shel kiyum, something which is going to last, dova miskayim. And furthermore, you're also only chayav if the thing you are writing on is going to last. Kagoin al for example, on leather, or klaf on parchment, or niyar, or paper, but if you write with something which is not going to last, kagoin b'mashkim or meperis, like we had yesterday, with water, or with liquids, or with water, or fruit juices, or you write with ink, so the actual material is good, but you write on leaves, vegetable leaves, or something which is not going to last a long time, potter, then you're potter. Of course, potter means it's also midrabanon, but you're potter from a chiyuv deraisa. So you're only going to be chayiv if you write with something which lasts on something that lasts. And so too, and so too with erasing. You're only going to be chayiv for mochik if you erase on something which is oimed, which is a dova ha'omed. But if you erase something on the leaf or something like that, that's not a dova ha'omed, it's not a dova miskayim, and therefore there's no mechika deraisa. All of the above is for to be over deraisa. And like we said yesterday, so writing on on the sand, or on a leaf or something like that, which is not miskayim, there's an issa drabanan, albeit not an issa deraisa. That's aleph. Base. Point number 2. Hakosev al basaroi b'diyai. If someone writes on their flesh with ink, chayev mipnei shu because your skin is leather ultimately, is sort of is skin. Even though with time, eventually it will emerge. You write something with ink on your hands. After a couple of weeks, it would have gone. It's like ksav shenimchak, but nevertheless, you're going to be chayiv. But if you scratch on your hands the tzura of ksav, because that's a shinui and that's not the normal way of writing. If you tear in leather or in skin, katavnis ksav, some form of writing, you sort of scratch it out. Chayiv mishum kosev. Haroshim al katavnis ksav, but if you sort of make an impression, you're roshem potter, then you're potter. The Tosefta actually has it the other way around. To pekareya potter of a roshim chayiv. The Rishonim discussed the difference between the Tosefta and what we said above in the Gemara. Okay. Now, what if point number 3 says the Mishnah Berurah Gimel? What if you write over something? So you've got like a Sefer Torah or parchment or any letter, any writing, and then you write over it. Is that a problem? You've got letters which are there, but you write over it. Then potter because you haven't done anything. You just sort of written over existing writing. That's not considered writing. That's when it's ink on top of ink. Another type of writing material. But if you do diyai al gabi sikra, if you've put the diyai on top of the sikra, then chayev shtaim. You're going to be chayev twice. Why chayev shtaim? Good quiz question.
For doing both.
Well, you've done, it's just ksiva. Why is it twice? So achas mishum kaisev, she'achsavu kasev hagen yosef b'rishonim, because it's a better writing, a better quality ink. V'achas mishum meiche, because you've erased what's underneath it. So you chayev twice. She'meiche b'ksivase shtei oisius hatachtonis. You've erased the writing that's underneath it. V'imhev sikra al gabi diyai partzah to mekalkel. But if you do the other round, sikra on gabi diyai, then you're partzah because that's just mekalkel. Okay, dalet. Next point. Eina kaisev chayev chatzas ad sheyichtav shtei oisius. To be over the issa of ksiva ben HaTorah, you have to write at least 2 letters. Avalim kosev oisachas. But if you only write 1 letter, afilu ha'isa gedoyle k'shtaim, even it's a very large letter, partzah mechatzas, you are exempt min HaTorah. You're partzah from chatzas. Umikol makom issa deraisa ikka afilu oisachas. However, you still are also in a mitzvah, still also in a Torah, for chanal b'reish hasiman, because we said chatzi shir is also in a Torah. So therefore, even though you write 1 letter, that's a good example. It's chatzi shir because it's 1 letter, but it's still also in a Torah. But you're not chayev chatzas unless you do 2. V'ois achas she'amanu departahu afilu hoisa smucha l'chsav she'yikosim mikodim. So now you get a bit complicated. Let's say you have a letter, I know the word av, and next to it, you write the letter lamed. So you really written 1 letter, but you've combined it to 2 letters. So how is that dealt with? So even if it's adjoining other lettering, at the end of the day, you've only written 1 letter, and therefore you are partim from the chiyuv min HaTorah. To kim Shabbos the since the end of the day you only wrote 1 letter. If it happens to be the last sefer in the Torah, let's say, or you've finished off the sentence, and that completes it, then you're chayev. Why? Because you've completed something, and therefore your writing is effective. Say you only write 1 letter, but it's a simon. You'll see in a second what that means. Even though it can be a representation of a whole word, still your potter. So for example, on a box you write the letter mem, and that indicates that the contents of this box is maisa. So you've written 1 letter, but you mean a word. For example, you write mem and you mean 40, so it's a number. At the end of the day, you've written 1 letter, and therefore you are potter. If you are magia, you amend the letter, and you make 1 letter into 2. A ches is actually made up of 2 zayins. Remember we did this way back. And you break the top, the roof of the ches, and you got 2 zayin. The ches is like an inverted 1 zayin and the other zayin, and therefore by just erasing the roof, you've made 2 letters. And you need it chayev because you've created 2 letters. You write a ches, and by mistake you write 2 zayin. Yeah, you didn't join it together. Instead of you got chof vov instead of the mem, so you've actually written 2 letters. Because you just lifted up the kulmas, the quill, and you wrote 2 letters instead of 1. Why? Because you intended to write 1 letter, but just with the slip of the pen, you wrote 2 letters. So you're potter. Hey, next point. When you say that you're chayev for writing, if you write a minimum of 2 letters, even if those 2 letters don't spell a word, could go in aleph gimel, ag doesn't mean anything, and therefore you're still chayev. Even if it's the same letter, mishem echot could go in tas, gag, choch, dad, you're still chayiv. V'gam kin chayiv. Even if you were planning on writing more, could go in titnu or gagois. Because of rak shtei oisos elu mehen, you were planning on writing titnu and you write tof and you stop there, you're still chayiv because you've written 2 letters. Ava pisha chayiv. The da. The lefima shenifsek le'el b'simens lamavov. The ein haziyunin shel oisos shat nesgatz ma'akev. That the ziyunin of the tagin, the little crowns you write on top of the letters in the Sefer Torah, even though they're not ma'akev, almad mikri ksav below zeh. In other words, if you write words without the tagin, without the ziyunin, it's still considered a ksiva. Im kain, im kaisu shtei oisos afilu b'Sefer Torah, tefillah mezuz b'li ziyunin, gam kain chayev. So if you write 2 letters in the Sefer Torah, but you haven't decorated them with a tagin, you're still chayav because it's not ma'akev those decorations. And certainly with other types of writing 2 letters, you're already chayav. And so too with gittin, when you write it without beliziyunin, without the tagin, the crowns on top of the letters, it's not ma'akev, and therefore you're going to be chayav. Any writing, even in different languages, you're going to be chayiv. The consensus of all the poskim is that so long as you're writing 2 letters, it can be in English and French, it doesn't make a difference, you're going to be chayiv, or different alphabets. For Rambam, for example, you write 2 letters which indicate the number. You write, I don't know, kuf mem, which means 140. That's already, you're still chayiv for that. Okay, next point. Vov. Shtei oisje shemanu lechiyuv hu afilu im kosum b'shnei dapi pinkas. When you write 2 letters, you're going to be chayiv for. You could write it on 2 boards, which are they're not on the same board. Board A, board B, and you write a letter on one and a letter on the other, but you put the boards together, that's considered ksiva. I.e. you put them at the edge of one and the edge of the other, and you can put them together, that's already considered a ksiva, even though they're on 2 separate boards. You can write it on 2 walls, one wall over there, one wall over here, but they're next to each other, that's considered chayiv. Because ultimately they're next to each other, even though they're on different walls. And you can read them as one, and therefore you'd be chayiv for that ksiva. How about that? So you write your piece of paper in London, and you write an aleph on it, and then you... What? No. Oh, I see, on Shabbos. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah, even on... Yeah. Okay, so you've done lots of problems. And then you write the letter base on another piece of paper in another place. Shebizman, you're still chayiv. Shebizman, even though the letters are hundreds of miles apart. Shebizman shemekarav negin zemzeh, because when you bring them together, negin zemzeh, they actually it actually works. And all you got to do is just bring them together. But if you write 1 letter on the ground and 1 letter on the ceiling, or your 2 walls which are distant from each other, on sort of the right hand side of one pinkus and the left hand side of the other, or they're just far away from each other, then potter. Okay, next, Zayin. Hakaisev bismol, you write with your left hand, with the back of your hand, you write it sort of, your back is turned, your hand is turned round, and you put the quill in between your fingers and do it like that, or beragle, or with your, you put the quill in between your toes, you write with your foot, befiv, or you put the pen in your mouth, or mafarka with your elbow, etzile yadov, potter. That's a shinui, and that's why sometimes the doctor. I had with the doctor. I was there a few months ago. There was some sort of Hatzalah call, and the guy called. The doctor himself wanted to call Hatzalah, so he got his phone out and he used his knuckles. Right, so that's a shinu. That's kalachayat. Al mikol makom is sur yesh afilu beraglav chagavna, but midrabanan, of course, you don't. It's still an issa. Iter shekosav bimino, a lefty who writes with his right hand, shehiloik a small kolodon, which is like you and I, people with right hand who are right-handed writing their left hand, his potter. Vim kolsav bismol chayiv. But if the lefty writes with the left hand, then it's of course chayiv. V'hashelit b'shtei yodov, someone who can write with both hands. B'shaveh v'kolsav bein b'min and bein bismol. So he's ambidextrous and he can write equally well with his right and his left hand. Chayiv. Cotton oiches bekumas. Next one. Cotton oiches bekulmas. The cotton is holding the quill. V'gadol oiches b'yod v'kosev, and the adult is holding and helping him. Chayev, because he has facilitated the writing. It's like when the Sefer writes, the letting in the Sefer Torah, you're not doing anything, he's just sort of guiding your hand. Godel eiches bekulmas, but if it's the other way around, where the Godel is holding on to the kulmas, for cotton eiches beyodei, and the kid is directing and guiding, because if potter, then the Godel is potter. To bezer, here, in this case, the Godel is not doing anything. And if the person holding the kulmas is intending to assist him, then then the chiyuv reverts back to the person holding the kulmas. Okay. If you write in order to ruin the parchment, then you're chayiv. Because the chiyuv is not on the makom but on the writing, and you've written. But if you meichik, then you're potter. Okay. Ches hareishem reshamim. If you make imprints, v'tzuros ba'koisel, or pictures on a wall, b'shoshar, or with paint, v'chayetzi bohen, kader shatzayarim roshim, like people who like graffiti artists and other people. Harizet toledes kosev v'chayev mishum kosev. That's a tolda of kosev, and therefore you're chayev because of kosev. Ve'im oiset tzura b'vli tzura. And if you do a tzura b'vli b'kli tzura, hainu shakli oimed lekach lana oisa, afilu oisa b'ksasa, even if you do part of the tzura, chayev mishum makar patin sheigma melechtes al shalakli. V'chein ha'moichik es ha'roshim k'tei l'saken. And so too, if you rub out something which is an impression in order to fix it, harizet told us moichik v'chayev. Next thing, also lechabe oisa shel kesef lepareiches v'chayetzi b'y. You're not allowed to join letters on a pareiches and similar to kein kosev, because it's like writing. V'chein osa lahasrimen, and you can't remove it. To kein moichik, because that's like moichik. V'ayim b'chayodim klal amenzayim mashikosu b'zeh. V'atan avoy ksas min mechika. Okay, they're just the last few lines now. And now we'll talk a little bit about mechika, v'sirtut, and underlining. Ha-moichik ksav al manas lichtov. If you erase lettering in order that you can write afresh, b'makam achak shtei oisios, 2 letters, chayev. That is what moichik is. Erasing space where you can now write 2 letters, that is moichik in your chayev. V'afilu eis achas imhi gedola. Even if erasing 1 large letter, v'yesh m'komis k'dei lichtov shtayim, and there is enough place to write 2 letters, chayev. V'hamoichik al manas l'sakin. And if you are erasing in order to fix it, to improve it, afilu shelo manas lichtov, not to write anything. Kagoin shoy oitus yeseris batorah u'mochon. For example, the Sefer got a bit carried away and he wrote some extra letters, and you just need to erase it to make it kosher. You're not erasing it in order to write, but you're just erasing it to improve it, to be misakin it. Gam kein chayev, because that's a productive mechika. Kosev Chai Odom. The Chai Odom writes, to kol ha-melachos chutz kosev chayev bein b'yimino bein b'smolei. All melachas, apart from writing, you're chayev whether you do it with your right hand or with your left hand. Ve'hevi raya lezeh mitosef to perek yud, ach beragloi b'fiv mefrakei mashma shu potav asa. It's if you do it with your foot or your hand or something like that, it's potav also. Hamasarte. Now what is that? You underscore. If you ever get in your Aliyah, you see a Megillah, and you see that there's scratching on the paper. It's lining. That's how the sofa gets it so beautifully straight. So masaret knai v'klaf. You scratch out lines on paper or on klaf for chiyetzi boy kadei lichtov shtei oisios tachas oisios sirtut chayev v'chein kasheroitze lachtoich or. So too when you want to cut leather, or yishad dvarim, or anything else, or masaret tchilan, you put a line on it first, tchila kadesh yechav mechitucha, so that you can be an accurate cutting. Gamze bichlal masartet. Vuadin choshe etzim, and so too carpenters. Shemavirin chut shel sikra. They draw a line al gabe hakoira kadesh yinso b'shav, that you can saw it accurately. Oy hagvolim she'esim kain ba'avonim, or people who work with stone. Kadesh yefatzal even b'shav, that you can chisel away in a straight way. Kol zehu bichlal masaret. All of the above, drawing a line so that you can do something straight, is covered by masaret. Whether you do it with paint or with any material, you're chayiv. And I've said the Chavetz Chaim after this long aside. I've gone to town. I've gone to quite a lot of length and all of this to clarify what things are also midraisa, what is also midrabanan, The nafkamina, and what will be the nafkamina? Alidei any Yehudi b'makom mitzvah, regarding instructing a non-Jewish person to do this b'makom mitzvah. To Chaim lam b'simin shin zayin the issa deraisa ein matirin alidei any Yehudi afilu b'makom mitzvah. But you can only tell a non-Jewish person to do something which is a drabanan shvus to shvus b'makom mitzvah. That would be allowed, but not to tell him to do a deraisa. That's why I've been very clear explaining all the details of koseid and of moichek. Okay.